Swasti, how do we take forward the discussion from here?
I have few things that I want to ask you.
Okay.
I want you to share it with me and our fellow viewers as well.
Uh-huh.
I think it's going to help me and them both.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
the title Roots in Oblivion,
Uh,
it's quite, hatke.
mhm.
So, what does this title actually mean to you as a writer? What does the title mean to you?
Right. So I'll talk first about the title, and I'll then try to take you in as much less sentences as possible as to how I actually came to the book, or probably the book was there. I was directed to the book. So roots in oblivion literally means I'll first translate it into Marathi. In Marathi, roots is mula and oblivion is vismarnat. So literal translation of this book is vismarnatli padamu, which literally means that collectively we as humans, we have oblivionated, that is we have wiped out or we have conveniently forgotten or uh, pushed ourselves too far away or too away from the roots, from our roots. Those roots could be cultural, those could be in terms of literature, in terms of music, dance, drama, or it could be fundamentally the basics or the sanskar that we keep talking about, right? Or
Right.
the behavioral the behavioral progressions or the behavioral patterns that are taught to us even when we are inside the mother's womb, which we call as sanskar in Sanskrit, Hindi, or Marathi. So we are, for reasons unknown, we are literally coming far away from them at a very blasphemous speed. And the only possible answer to this is because we have this overhyped love for the westernized, globalized culture. Now, the Western culture or any culture in itself is never bad. But then my problem with, uh, acclimatizing or internalizing any culture too much is that somehow I'll give you a very crude and a very gauti kind of an example. For some reason, we find wearing a lungi or a dhoti very down market, and for us, jeans is very cool.
Correct.
Now the whole
Absolutely.
point is jeans was developed in the United States, and if you don't know for a fact, or if you know for a fact, jeans was actually the go-to uniform for the workers or the
Workers. Correct.
for the worker, for the industrial workers, because it was convenient. It had those pockets and everything, and that became a fashion. Now I have massive respect for the United States because it showed the way for individualism, freedom, and whatnot. But they also are great marketers of anything. So for them,
Mhm.
the big M or the golden M of McDonald's, they have propagated in such a way that junk food has become our staple diet right now. So for
Correct.
Maharashtrians, poli bhaji is the down. It's like we look down upon poli bhaji, or you guys might be looking down upon appam rice and whatnot, right? But our go-to comfort food has become burgers. I don't have anything
Correct.
against anything, but my whole point is we don't need to compare these things. And because we are
Right.
getting oblivionated from our roots or our culture, it has started affecting our psyche. So I
Mhm.
have an Indian classical music ka background. I might not be pursuing it right now, but I'm very proud a student of that art. I have been learning it for more than 15 to 16 years. So when people, even in our college, if you remember, I would tell them that I am an Indian classical musician and I like to listen to old Hindi songs. And the first reaction was, bro, what was that? Tum Beatles nahi sunte ho kya? Yeah, don't you
Yeah.
listen to Bono? Yeah, don't you listen to U2 or Chris Martin or all that? Now, I'm not,
Mhm.
or many others whose name I keep
Mhm.
forgetting now. Frank Sinatra. So I was like, no, they are great, but it's just that probably I don't enjoy them that much that I enjoy this, because this is what my, for generations, my people have been doing. So, all this frustration was pent up inside me for a very long time, because till we are in school, we are exposed to a very limited daira or a very limited audience or very limited atmosphere. But once we
Mhm.
start going into the junior college and then senior college and whatnot, uh, we come across many people, which is great. We come to know about a lot of things. But these
Mhm.
people are normally 70% or 80% of these people normally consume the same content relevant to that era. And that is a very dumbed down content. Now that content isn't bad as such. That's a great content. But purely saying that because it is famous, that content is the best, that is something very which I completely do not relate to. So basically, there is always a concept in literature or music. There is a massical and there is a classical thing. Now,
Right, right.
classical people always have that elitist and fascist and uplifted attitude about their own selves, which I don't relate to. And the massical people who consume massical or commercial content, they are like nahi Salman Khan hi bhari hai, which is again bad. So I for
Right.
myself always find myself like a pendulum, and I always
Mm.
see myself somewhere in the between. I like to take best from everything, but while maintaining my roots, and that is where Roots in Oblivion actually came from. This concept
Wow.
of Roots in Oblivion.
Yeah.
And
So great,
yeah, please go ahead.
No, actually, I was about to say that this generation, our generation, we live in such a superficial bubble
Yeah,
that we've really forgotten where we've come from, and
right.
I've forgotten what our ancestors has left for us, the values and everything. So in this particular time, a book like this, a content like this would be like an escape, and we dive into our roots and understand what values
Right,
we actually come from. And
right.
it's amazing how you've written this book. I mean, kudos.
I don't know. It,
And
it it
thank you.
was it was my frustration which has done the talking, but
That's very good.
yeah. So please tell me, not the praise, but what you would like to say more about this thing, not the praise.
No, I actually would like to thank you. I'm sure a lot of people would actually like to thank you. So, on behalf of everyone, I would like to thank you for writing this sort of a content because it's really needed for the generation from where we belong.
Mm,
So,
true.
that's it. I mean, I don't think anybody should lose out reading on this particular book. So, so I actually remember the day that you came to me and said that
Mhm.
you're writing this book, and there were a lot of things
I'm
that
glad.
came into my mind.
I have to break you. I'm glad we are past that praising me phase because I couldn't even look into the screen while that was happening.
I know.
Yeah,
That's why I stopped. I thought, okay,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
बहुत
yeah.
embarrassed कर लिया.
Okay, yeah. Good. Yeah,
I know
please.
you. Come on.
Yeah, that you.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
like I said, I remember the day that you came to me. So about that you're writing this book and everything. I had a lot of questions in my mind.
Yeah.
How? Why? So a lot of answers. You gave me a lot of answers right now.
Mm.
But I would like to ask you one thing. What inspired you to write this book? Not in the way that you explained, but did you like read any content that inspired you? Did you read some kind of an article or watch any video that thought, okay, this is something good, I should write a book
Right.
about it? Anything like that happened before you started?
So what happened was I didn't have a cable TV or internet in my home for the longest time. So I was
Mhm.
always the last person to have a color TV or cable TV or a typical broadband internet connection or
Mhm.
consuming those typical sitcoms that like Friends or something like that. So same was, so that 2 to 3 to 4 year lag in my life was persisted after that as well. But I mean, the biggest thing that I am really blessed in my life, and I'm really eternally grateful for that, is that my grandmom has influenced my dadi, my grandmom, my paternal grandmom has influenced my life like no other person probably. And I still remember when I was in junior or senior KG, we had just a 3 to 4 hour school. And my dad was, of course, working. My mom was also doing great in her profession. She was a principal in a school. So basically, both of them wouldn't have time because of job and obvious reasons. So my dadi would make sure that whenever I got down from the rickshaw, came home, and I was super hungry as kids are. So she would roll out fresh chapatis for me, and while doing that, she would recite tales of Ramayana and Mahabharata. Now, the interesting part about these tales, that the tales that she specifically recited was, she made sure two things. One, especially, was that she would recite that entire story in the chronology form, like Ramji ka janam hua, Dashrath. I mean, right from Dashrath, then Ramji ka janam, then the Vanvas, then Hanuman ka milna, then the eventual fight. Everything. The chronology was totally in place, bang on. But more importantly, she would, so if she was rolling chapatis, giving me out, and that entire process took about 35 to 45 minutes. So every day I would remember she would tell me one small story, and the story would be taken forward. And when I would finish eating, her story would be completed at that particular spot of time. And before I would go to wash my hands, she would ask me that, okay, so what was the moral of story today? So initially I was like, yeah, Ramji bahut hi handsome the and intelligent the, and he would learn all the mantras very quickly, and he was good at bow and arrow. And then she made me think, and she actually turned my thinking process to the point wherein she started making me realize कि नहीं, इस episode से what you hear superficially is, well, it's okay. Let's not even go into the debate where those stories are true or false. Nobody cares about it, honestly. I don't personally. But what was the moral? What would you take away from that story on that day? And this continued for close to 2 to 3 years. So, and I would love those stories with the moral. So it was like Aesop's fables, because Aesop's fables have that story, small story and then moral.
Yeah.
Same thing went here as well. So this, and so Ramayan का पूरा वो हो गया एक patch, एक 4 months, 5-6 months के लिए. Then she would recite the entire story right from Krishna ji ka janam to Mahabharat ka ending. That would be for 6 months. Then again we would go back to Ramayana, and this continued for 2 to 3 years. And I just remember those moments. I don't remember exactly what she told me, but I'm very sure the book that I wrote, which is on Ramayana and its philosophical implications, I literally didn't have to research anything much about Ramayana. Those stories were that ingrained inside my head. But the quality that she ingrained inside me, that you have to look deep into what the stories mean. And that is how I actually tried to weave Ramayana stories with other things, which we'll discuss in the later episodes. This was the first trigger point. The second was, as I said, I never watched much of the Mahabharata Ramayana series, thankfully. Uh, in 2013 or 14, on a particular famous TV channel, the Mahabharata series was completely refurbished, and it was first created, or the creative head was Mr. Devdatta Patnaik. Now Devdatta Patnaik is that person who did his. I'm really not sure, but I think he is extremely highly qualified in many subjects. Is all that I know. He has done his MBA and doctors and PhD and whatnot. But later he somehow tried. He went back to our so-called mythological or stories from the Puran, and he exactly did this. He took one character like Sita, Ravan, Bibhishan, Karna, Krishna, Arjun, and whatnot, and how these characters felt and what was their psychology, and how you can apply their thought process to a corporate scenario or your business scenario or your in general mental well-being. So this person, Devdatta Patnaik, he actually was called by that particular channel as a creative head. And I'll just tell you one thing. This Mahabharata was refurbished in such a way that every character, which is so-called or which is portrayed in a typical good or bad way, like Pandavas were the bad ones, sorry, Pandavas were the good ones, Kauravas were the bad ones. Krishna was the one who was in charge of everything. Bhishma Pitama was the idealistic one, or the one who was chronically deprived of all that was good in life, but he had to continue for his family. And the typical thing, Shakuni Mama was the most evil person you could find in that story and everything. What Devdatta did was he tried to go back to the root of that character or story and tried to understand why that character was so angry. Why Shakuni Mama was so angry that he was actually cause the entire Mahabharata, or he would try to plot the death of all the Pandavas. Why Duryodhan was anguished for his entire life, because the so-called kingdom that he was told that you will be getting, suddenly one fine day, five elder brothers of his come, and then they say that no, it was technically theirs, but since they were somewhere else, so it was yours. So all these human psychology things, and this was the trigger point. this Mahabharata series. I'll be dropping the link in the description. Third, and probably the most important, was the scientist called Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan. I'll be very brief when I say this because Carl Sagan is again like my idol. So I can literally go on and on about him for hours. Carl Sagan was originally a scientist. He later started realizing that the more you learn about science, because science is all about observation, and human observation has its limit. So where you can't see directly with the eye, you develop telescopes. Then you develop radio telescopes. Then you develop technology. Then you're sending objects far in the space. So what this Carl Sagan scientist did was he sent a satellite till Pluto. He convinced NASA to turn the camera on that particular satellite towards the Earth. He made them to click one picture. This picture was transmitted through radio frequency waves to NASA. And by that time, nobody understood why the hell was he doing this, because it took a lot of time and effort on the part of that satellite. And NASA was very angry with him. And then Carl Sagan turned into a philosopher from a scientist. From a scientist, he turned into a philosopher. And he would just put out one single slide, which was this photo taken by that satellite. It was like a rectangular photo. It was a black or a grayish photo. There was sun somewhere here, and you could see literally nothing. There were specks of dust here, here. And he would just highlight one point and he would say that, look, this is where you all are, and this is where entire humanity has existed ever. This is where every religion, every war in human history, every empire, every kingdom, every love affair, everything happened on this dot. And the world existed before this dot, and the world will exist after this dot. So if you want to really save yourselves from your own selves, because humans are the greatest threat to humans. This was what his philosophy was basically was. And this thing simply blew my mind, because we always think of science as something. Science and philosophy are these apart, like they are poles apart
Right,
apparently.
right.
But Carl Sagan, he realized that the more you talk about science, the more you think about science, you know 0.01% of what there actually is. And so you need to believe in things that are out of your control. And
Right.
that is where his philosophy came from. And that is where he said that the more people are made to understand basic things like sun, galaxy, universe, stars, planets, satellites in simple words, they will understand that they are nothing in terms of the larger cosmic things. And probably when they realize that the wars in humanity will gradually reduce, and that was his way to look at the world. Unfortunately, as with all the geniuses, this genius had just a lifespan of 63 years. I think he had cancer or throat cancer or something, and he passed away way too soon. Actually, people like these should live for 200 to 300 years, but then the human body has its limits. So these are the three contents that specifically I consumed, which kind of pushed me into the direction of Roots in Oblivion. And more importantly, consuming this content on the sidelines, I was also doing my MBA. Then I went to a job. Now I'll not name the company, I'll not name the job profile. God bless everyone, because they were ultimately they were providing me employability and everything. But what happened was I was subjected to this negative bias, wherein those people are cool who don't have a lot of vocabulary. Have you noticed this? This is the new norm in the society. Or the well-read person is a nerd.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
A
So
person who knows
this
science
been going
is,
on for a really long time.
yeah. A person who knows science is looked down upon because apparently he's boring,
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So on similar lines, I know that there are crores of people who have a vocabulary better than me, but I also know that there are crores of people who have vocabulary less than me. Now, it's not my fault that I'm at a particular position wherever I am in English, in spite of the fact that I have not studied English literature as my degree ever.
Right.
But the job that I had required me to write lengthy articles after researching on different topics. the editors would keep telling me that you write on a very elitist level and we find hard to comprehend those words. Now, actually, it is their fallacy that in spite of being content editors, they are not knowing those words. And me as a researcher knows those words. So I don't know whose loss is it. They should actually rectify their life goals first. But anyways, they were very shrewd and very mean about it. And it really hit me in a very bad way. And one fine day when I was driving home from work after a really long days of work, I actually found myself crying when I was on the traffic signal, and I was like, "Do I really need to feel bad that I know some good things better than others?
Right.
Or maybe am I in the wrong profession? Or what is happening?" And then I started the chronic overthinker that I am. I started questioning my entire life, whether I should have been, whether I should have taken admission to English literature, whether going to engineering and MBA was a wrong option, though I succeeded and was a gold medalist there. But who cares? I mean, was that a wrong choice that I had made earlier? And all those kind of things. And then I took a sabbatical for about a couple of weeks from that job. And that was when it struck me that even all through MBA, whenever we were made to write certain things, writing came easily to me. I don't know how good or bad my vocabulary is, and I don't really care. Vocabulary is as good as you are a good communicator. So if you have excellent vocabulary but bad communication skills, your vocabulary is literally of no use. So I knew that I could communicate. And that was when I started writing. First, I thought of writing essays, but I thought that, well, it is not good enough. And then I restructuralized all my thought process and this entire frustration that I was talking to you in the previous question. All that frustration about elitism and how dumping down yourself is the new cool and everything. All those things came together to me. And that
Right.
was when I opened my laptop and went through a certain process which led me to writing the book. So that was about the content and the mindset that I had. So it was a deep frustration. So uh, i I don't know whether I should be saying this, but at least for me, I was in a very dark space at that time as well. But the good thing is that any art that I have decided to pursue, that has come from a very dark space. So maybe that dark space inside me, I was managing, or I did manage to funnel it out, and something beautiful and very positive came out. So
Correct.
each side has 2 points, something like that.
Wow, that's some inspiration, some stories that we have here. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I we viewers can derive a lot of inspiration out of it. Really good. So after I read this book, I'm sure you would have to have put a lot of effort in creating this content based
Yeah.
on research and reading a lot of things before actually getting to something that you want to write.
Yeah. Yeah.
So because there are quite a lot of heavy stuff in this book, there is a lot of general philosophy, a lot of Carl Sagan. So you would have had to put a lot of effort, a lot of time to derive that kind of content. So
Yeah.
tell us how that journey was. How did you research, or how much time did you take to research, and then finally come to something concrete? So how did that
So
happen?
the research actually didn't take a lot of time, simply because I'll in the subsequent episodes I'll make the structure of the book very clear why that structure is there, because a lot of people have a basic fundamental question about why the particular structure of the book, because this structure
Right.
is never utilized in a novel, because it is also a novel,
Right.
because it is 250 260 odd pages. I'm not really sure,
Mm-hmm.
but a novel is never divided, each chapter is never divided into parts. So I'll talk
Right.
about it later. uh,
Mm-hmm.
Talking about research, the mythological stories that are there in the book, they were there, they are inside, they are a part of me, they are inside my blood thanks to my grandmom. So very big, like 40 to 50% credit goes to her for just making sure that I absorb all those stories and the moral seek that we call it. The the
Mm-hmm.
the modern history or the late history that I needed to research. I mainly went to. I first went to Nasik because the book revolves around the city called Nasik. I have a Vada in Nasik, So I researched a certain ancient Indian scriptures inside that Vada. I'll also be talking about it subsequently when we talk about the flow. Apart from that, I interviewed a couple of people who were involved in during that particular era that I have mentioned in the book. So maybe if it's the 19, I mean, of course, like if it's the 1910 or 1920s, unfortunately, nobody's alive. But then if there is their sons or their daughters or their grandkids, someone like that. So people who are directly connected to them. So the interviews were a main source of content, the research. Second was some scriptures in Nasik. The third was, there is a very famous institution in India, in Pune rather. It is probably 120, 110 years old. It's called as the Bhandarkar Research Institute, if I get its name correctly. There is another institute called as the Agarkar Research Institute. So both of them have a lot of manuscripts and scriptures and ancient documents. Many of them are in the Modi Lipi. Now, Modi Lipi is the Lipi or the type of language which was used before the modern Marathi came into invention. So the manner in which the language is written itself changes. So I had to meet up with people who could also understand that Lipi or that particular type of language. So there was that as well. So these were the main three aspects how I researched, and this covered, I think, the 85 to 90% research was this, and of course certain facts I also covered on the internet. But I made sure that whatever I cover on the internet, those were official sources, because Wikipedia and all, I don't consider them sources explicitly. Anybody can go to Wikipedia and blabber or rubbish around. So yeah, that was about the research.
Wow, very interesting. You put a lot of personal effort on this research, going back to your family and these institutes. It's really amazing. So, do we have any sequel coming up soon? Because I see this is book one of the Oblivion series. So,
Yeah.
I'm
And
excited to know.
yeah, so the thing is, there will be three books, and it will happen in my lifetime. The first book was, well, it was more of a pent up frustration, and the drive for that book was very insane. Now, I'm not saying that the drive for the second or third book have been wiped out or they have funneled down. But the thing is, the mythological content that will be there in the second book is still there inside my head, and it will be there always. The modern day content or the historical content that I want to correlate that with, well, that is taking some time of my research, and I think for the next 6 months to probably 1 year, I might research more on that. And once I feel that I'm ready, I think the book will be there. So I think by next November 2021, the second book should be definitely on the table. So I think
Wow.
two-year gap sounds a fair deal, because the first
Yes,
book
of
was
course.
launched in November
November
2019.
12th.
So November 2021 sounds to be a good enough deadline for my own self for the second
Sorted.
book, and maybe the third book 2023 November again. Who knows?
Wow. Can't wait. Can't wait.
And I've also planned a couple of short stories, but then it's a very long term plan, so I don't think it's right to talk about it right now. Yeah. Anyways,
No.
so
So,
yeah,
anything?
I think that's about it. We covered a lot of peripheral topics. Let me put it that way, for Roots in Oblivion. And guys, as I said in the starting of this podcast is as much about Roots in Oblivion, the book, as it is about the habit of reading, which has been oblivionated by us. So we'll be also discussing other books, and my book, and what I mean by particular excerpts or chapters from this book. So yeah, I think that's about it for now. It's time for us to wrap up. So this is Apurva.
This is Swasti, and we are your host for Roots in Oblivion. Stay tuned for more. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you so much. See you soon. Bye bye. But see, it's never too late to wish anything, and that's what entire
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's what entire 1 hour Netflix special of Kanan Gill is all about. So
Of course,
we all make
it is.
wish lists which we never complete, but the important thing is that we do keep making wish lists because that's how it
Yeah, we'll
works.
make wish list in the formal letter format.
To and from.
To and
That's
from yours sincerely.
yours sincerely. That's
Here
it.
we are promoting Kanan Gill. Wow.
Yeah, any good content we would like to